The dream is now a reality. Dan and I own our own race car and we turn laps in it at our very first track day. But there was one lingering question.
What do we do next?
Well, as fun as track days are, you buy a race car for one reason, to race. But there's a heap of things that we need to do to this car before it's ready for that. So it's back to the workshop and... There's an old saying, the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray. Well, that could not be more true than during a global pandemic. While the race car and I were stuck in lockdown in Greater Sydney for weeks, Dan had been in Queensland filming the Gold Rush Hill climb. Unable to return to Sydney, he'd based himself out of regional New South Wales, and when they got locked down as well, things didn't look too great.
It's hard to continue being motivated when you're, stuck for 4 months without being able to do anything. We've not only moved away from our community of friends and family, we've moved away from our community of workplace as well. And while other places lock down and you can work from home, we can edit from home, but we can't really undertake any work. Oh, what's this? Oh, no way. Got the gear and nowhere to use it. So we got into sim racing when the first COVID struck. We bought a sim during when there was the rush on them, for that first couple of weeks, because everybody knew they weren't going to be able to go racing for a while. The number one priority with it was to stay engaged with our community, to try to be able to generate those relationships and friendships and build on them, and make sure that we were being able to keep in touch with the people that we cared about, not only from a business perspective, but from a friendship perspective as well, because we weren't able to go and see, for example, Travis and I couldn't see each other as easily, but on the sim we can get on Discord, have a chat and race around, and it's a real good thing for mental health.
So for me, the sim it's fun, but it's probably a bit more of a tool. I use it as a bit of a tool. It's no substitute for real world racing, but I use a sim called Assetto Corsa because it means I can mod it with like real world local tracks like Wakefield Park and Sydney Motorsport Park and all of that. And it just means that I can learn the tracks, learn the braking markers and all of that kind of thing prior to actually driving the track for real. And I feel like for our first track day, I'd done that a bit before we did that first track day, and I felt it helped me kind of with confidence just going straight out on the track and getting straight into it rather than having to take 5 laps or whatever to get used to the track and learn the markers and all of that. First visit post-COVID, and he walks straight past me and straight to the race car. I feel so special right now.
Hey mate!
Hey mate! Well, it's been over 100 days since we were last here together with the race car. Finally we're here, cameras are rolling, we're back to Project Race Car.
And I tell you what, I miss the race car.
I bet you do. Not so much me, just the race car.
Just
right?
the race car, mate. That's
but some really big things coming up.
Yeah.
Tell us what you've booked.
So we've booked a track day at Sydney Motorsport Park. We'll get the Pulsar out there, the Beast, and have a bit of a run around. We've seen how cool Turn 1 can be in one of these things, launching potentially through the grass on the outside.
Absolutely.
So we'll be keeping brave.
Sydney Motorsport Park is a step up really from Wakefield, isn't it? I mean, we'll be doing roughly 30 k's an hour more down the straight than we were at Wakefield. It's a much bigger track. Much more can go wrong there as well. I think Wakefield's a lot more forgiving to kind of the uninitiated.
There's not as many concrete walls to find at Wakefield. But we've caught up today to have a look at the car and sort of plan out what we need to do for the next episode to get ourselves ready for Sydney Motorsport Park, not Wakefield. And we thought we'd also take a look at the car because there was a few questions in the last episode about what it is, what's underneath it and what we're running. So we thought we'd take a look.
Yeah, so we did build it, well, the car was initially built as an APRA spec car. So the APRA, Australian Pulsar Racing Association, is a really cool grassroots entry-level kind of motorsport series, really great door-to-door racing. And we love it, but that being said, we didn't just buy this to race in APRA. We bought it so we could do things like hill climbs, super sprints, potentially want to do some enduros next year. So yeah, let's have a quick look through the car at all the things that have been done to it to make it the APRA spec car that it is. All right, so I'm going to take you through some of the modifications that have been done in the engine bay. So probably the first most obvious thing is over here. You can see the battery's been taken out. So that's to reduce the weight in the front end. That's been moved to a dry cell battery in the cabin. You'll also notice the pod air filter here. Now, you might remember in the last episode, we talked about a little issue that we had during the track day on like the first few laps where the airbox fell apart. So you can see our trackside temporary fix there. That will be properly fixed before the next track day. The next probably major modification that's been done to the engine bay would actually be the alloy radiator here. So I don't know how well you can see it from the camera, maybe looking down this way, but that's a full alloy radiator that's specifically designed to keep the engine cooler considering the extra load it's under in racing conditions. Now there's also been an oil cooler added down here, which you can see right down here in front of the radiator. And that's also supplemented by the oil filter being moved here and an oil catch can kind of down underneath the engine bay. One of the issues we did have before the first track day was, and I think we might have mentioned this on socials, we had an issue with the alternator. So we had to actually swap out the alternator for a brand new aftermarket one, and that performed really well at the track day. And I think the last thing really that's been modified in the engine bay, we'll look at suspension and the inside of the car a bit later, but is the strut brace running across the two coilover points. So other than that, the engine is very much stock standard. It's a bog stock SR20 Nissan Pulsar engine, fuel injected, 16 valve twin cam. As you can see, it actually goes really well and it's quite a reliable engine when it's looked after well. So I think this has got many more track days left in it.
So taking a look at the wheel and tyre and the suspension and components we're using under there, we've got the Lenozo 15-inch rims, which are one of the ones that a lot of Pulsar guys are now running. They're brought into the country and pretty good value for what they are. So Travis and I bought a set each to be able to run our own tyres eventually so that we weren't interrupting each other's tyre supply. We've got on here one of the APRA spec MRF tyres because we were able to get them pretty cheap secondhand. Once the guys have run a race meeting or two, they like to step up to some newer tyres. So there's generally a lot of tyres around for these sort of cars, which keeps your overheads low, which effectively was what we were looking for at the start. So now if I take the wheel off, we can get a look at what's under there. So for braking at the front, we're running the slotted DBA discs as well as Forza brake pads. In the rear, we're just running OEMs because it's not as important back there. If you notice of any of the Pulsar racing, the rear just sort of trails around, of course, being a front wheel drive car. So it's also running the braided brake lines, which are a bit better to handle the stresses of being on track. For the ride, we've got the yellow speed adjustable coilovers, which are APRA spec. So these are the ones that all the cars run in the race series, which also gives us a lot of ability to learn off some other people about some track specific setups, which we thought would really help us get some respectable times on track relatively quickly. Now, something we haven't done yet is the brake booster delete to this car. All of the racing spec ones have had that happen just to be able to give that better brake pressure, better modulation for when you're under the stresses of being on the circuit.
In the interior of the car, it's probably where it's obvious, the most obvious modifications have been made. I mean, first up is the 6-point AGI roll cage. It's bolt-in roll cage. the Sparko race wheel with the Boss kit and the quick release. Short shift kit with an extension, so you kind of don't have to move your hand too far to shift. That being said, neither of us are all that happy with that, so we might change that down the track. The dash has obviously been modified with the button panel here. We've got a GPX lap timer and dash, which is really good. It has the shift lights, a fuel level indicator, and then a few things that we've added to the car ourselves is, of course, the race seat, which you saw in episode 1. And then up here we've got the wide angle rear view mirror, which really does improve the visibility around the car.
Boot, it's got one. Doesn't shut though, so we'll need to fix that before the next track day. Last and probably most importantly, names on the side. That's what makes it a race car. They're worth at least 5 horsepower each. We're ready to roll. So we think that gives you a pretty good overview of what this car is, what's in it at the moment, and probably where we're heading with it a little bit. We still don't exactly know what we want to do. Now, heading before the track day, we've got to throw some new drive shafts in it. At our first track day, we heard a bit of a noise. Speaking to John O'Hovey down at Oz Track, we thought it's better just to shove some new ones in, make sure that that's all okay. We're going to check the brakes, make sure that we've got pedal.
Going to put some ducting in as
yeah,
well.
We've also got to cool down.
It's going to be almost summer by the time we hit the track at Eastern Creek, so I think we're going to need that airflow in the cabin.
We're going to run ducts on both sides, which you see on a lot of the Pulsar spec race cars, so we'll be getting an intro into how to do that, how to cut the perspex as well, so that'll be pretty interesting. But before we do all that, we'd love to hear from you guys what you'd like us to see doing with this car next year. We're not sure whether we want to hit some hill climbs, maybe go for the New South Wales Super Sprint Championship, bit of competition between the two of us, or even hit something like the 300 series, go to Wakefield, Winton and Sydney and compete in those 3 endurance events. It's a great little platform for it. It'll need some changes, which we're happy to take everybody through, and then we can sort of get some racing under our belts as well. So let us know in the comments what you'd like to see. Also, thank you for supporting us on Blendline TV. If you'd like to do more to be able to help us create content like this and other racing coverage for you, check us out on blendline.tv. There's a few different ways to become a premium partner of what we're up to. But until the next episode, thanks for being here. Travis, time to get into it.
Absolutely. See you next time.